Tāia te kawa nui, tāia te kawa e tipu ai te kākano I hara mai I roto I te korokoro o te manu tau mai I te rangi. Ka tau ki te kōpū o papatū nukunuku, kia koe rongo mātāne, kia koe haumie tike tike, kia koe rongo māui, kia koe anu hoki ko pani tīnaku, kia koe e maru. Puanga kairau, ko matariki tā pua, ka oti atu kia whānui a wairo tī, wairo tā. Pā korokoro ko tā waha katoa atu I te huanui, whakatū tā rewa ki te rangi. Ka whanno, hara mai te toki, o haumie, o huie, tāiki e. E whakamihi nei ki te ringa tuku I te kupu whakamoimiti ki aia I te wāhingaro, tēnā koe. Ka rua ko nā pautoko manoa o nā whare whakairo. Nā marae kura katoa, nā whare kura katoa, wa uruhia e te manu tuawhiti. Ka huaki katoa o nā kuaha o tuawhitu, o tua whakarere tonu. Te tai e pari ana ki tawhiti ki mamao whakaoti atu haere kouta. O te whakamihi atu ana hoki tēnei ki runa kia tātou katoa nā uri o pēpeke, nā uri o punga. Tātou nā uri o papatiraha, ko rāuatahi me tana hoa makau ariki a rangi nui tamaku. Nā kai whakarite te tikana whakaaro o tēnei kaupapa tēnā koutou, tēnā kōrua tahi paunamu kōrua ko Jessica, ko te hora mai an hoki I te tono. Nā waha kōrero kua taki haere I te iho o tēnei kaupapa, nei naka te rere atu o te aroha o mihi ki runa ki a tātou katoa huri noi tō tātou whare ipurani tēnā tātou katoa. Ko te Onetapu. Kia ora tātou. My talk to you is probably certainly won't be as flamboyant as your previous speakers, and I'd like to acknowledge them with a deep aroha. I'd also like to start off by saying that when I read the title of our kaupapa as a collective talk for us all today, the words that immediately struck me, as they would from a linguistic background, was te Onetapu and ora nui, as two very closely connected mates, on the language continuum. So te Onetapu for me gave rise to a number of other very, I think, significant words that immediately connect us to this English word that is a close equivalent to the thing we talk about as being resilience, and knowing what resilience and sovereign authority might mean from a soil point of view, from an one point of view. So Onetapu sits alongside words, for me, sits alongside words like o nukurangi, and words like te o me te a. Each time, I understand each time we see imprinted in a word the syllable o has come directly from the heavens, from the whare of Io. O nukurangi is a word that describes both papatua nuku and rangi nui at the same time, that they exist at the same time, they breathe the same breath, they live in the same space, they live in the same spiritual dimension. And or at the beginning of that word tells us that we are in that space. So or tells us that we are in the realm and in the domain of io matua kore. So the celestial and the heavenly knowledge is hidden in plain sight in Te Reo Māori, in our language. Te o is another word, is the third word that struck me immediately as we speak about the resilience of Te Onetapu, the sacred soils of Papatūānuku. Te o was in fact, generally speaking, I think most Māori communities have been raised on the meta-narratives of understanding the creation story that Hine Ahuone had breathed into her life and her spirit, one burst of breath. From the stories of my people, she in fact enjoyed the life-enhancing event of two breaths. The first one was known as Te O, and Te O was the first breath breathed into her nostrils. And then her eyes awoke. The second breath was referred to, we call Te A, and many of our mokopuna are named Te A. And Te A was the second life-giving breath that was expounded into her lungs. And she then arose and became known as Te Hine I Ahu Mai I Te One. Ko hine ahu one. So my talk with you is really, I want to be able to focus us around, now can I control these slides or can I not? Around a couple of things. First of all, I'm very interested as a keen gardener, as many of us are in this forum today, in the celestial origins and the importance of the celestial and cosmic connections that we have as physical bodies, as humans, and the non-human connection to those all-pervasive and inseparable links. Kina atua, kina rangi. Papatūānuku as the largest living organism on this planet not only enjoys, I think, an abundance of, she not only enjoys an inseparable spiritual connection, kina atua, kina rangi, but she also enjoys an abundance of ihi, wehi, and wana. And I wanted to speak about how ihi, wehi, and wana moderates her sense of wellness, both physically and spiritually. Papatūānuku responds. She doesn't judge, and she is not. She doesn't judge. She's not apologetic, but she responds to ihi, wehi, and wana.
Hey, can you see her in the participant list? Oh, sorry. Damn it.
Sorry. Pai?
Ko pai teina aroa mai mo tina.
So her sense of well-being and the rise and the fall of her Māori is dependent on the manner in which we augment or indeed reduce the activities and events of ihi, wehi, and wana. Ihi is the experiences, numerous experiences we enjoy in life, the experiences that thrill us about life. We are thrilled about life. Life thrills us. When we see our mokopuna performing haka, kapa haka on the stage, we become thrilled by that. We're filled with a sense of excitement and thrill about that experience. Wehi is when we have many, many experiences in our lives where we are awed, we're simply awed by something. And there are many of those things in our lives. And then wana is when ihi and wehi reach such a height, we become thrilled and excited that wana causes us to become intimate by all those experiences. So we literally fall in love with life. Papatuanuku is the source of all that life, and you would have heard Pounamu reiterate that several times in the previous presentation. I'm here to repeat that again in that way. Te Onetapu. Te Onetapu, and from Te Onetapu and a kawa point of view, I think setting the context around kawa, the whole knowledge system of the creation of the heavens, of rangi and papa, in itself is a kawa. That knowledge system is a kawa. And that is how it's treated and viewed from a Tūhoe worldview. The knowledge system, Te One One Te Whenua Te Rangi, is a system of kinship, is a system of whakapapa in action. I think if I understand one of the major principles, first of all, fundamental principles, humans and non-humans, is understanding that despite your age in this world, tuakana is always rangi and papa. Teina is always the human race. We are always younger and in service to our elder sibling or to our tuakana, which is the whole natural environment. We remain in service to her, to him, to them. The other thing I want to just add here as well is that one, like te kōpū wahine, and I think that might be the next slide, whoever has the ability to change the slide. Ka pai. I want to very quickly touch on that this is a mokopuna growing in the kōpū of its fire, of its mother. I just want to pick on a couple of things, the first of which is the word pito and the word rauru and the word iho. So one, like te kōpū wahine, or like the whare tangata. Another word for it, of course, is the ahuru mōwai, which means a shelter of protection and preserve. Te one, like te kōpū wahine, is a receptacle for histories, for language. It's a library for culture and values and stories. It holds the events that we experience throughout the continuum of our life. It holds a memory of love, of war, of compassion, of heartbreak, of epic events, of secrets, of the wonders of our lives. It holds the stories that are etched upon our souls for future generations to decode. The pito itself, and you might just see it closely in this diagram here, the pito is in fact only about two centimeters, a centimeter and a half from the connection to the baby. That in fact is the pito. The opposite end of it, the end that's attached to the mother, is referred to as te rauru. And the rauru is te rā I uruai te kākano ki reira. That's where that word comes from. Te rā uru. Te rā I uruai te kākano ki reira. So the implanting of the seed is the place that is referred to as te rauru. The umbilical cord in the middle, all that cord in the middle, is in fact the iho matua. And the iho matua is absolutely imperative because the iho matua plays two functions. Its first function, is that it is the promise of io, that the mother and the child shall never be separated spiritually from the heavens. The second one, of course, is that physically it may be detached, but spiritually that never occurs. A koira te tino tikanga o te iho. And one of the reasons why I raise the iho matua is the iho matua is in fact the whare where philosophy is shaped and given texture and colour. Māori philosophy is shaped in that whare, the whare o te iho matua. So whakapapa, tikanga and kawa like whakapapa, they are ideologies, but they are informed by the philosophies of that whare. That whare, and the kai pupuri te kai tiaki, ko te mātamu o tawa whare, ko papatu anuku. So we deal with these kinds of tikanga that we hear every day. We hear every day as human beings. One of them is whakapapa. Many people have a surface understanding that whakapapa is about how we connect to each other in kinship whanaunatana. That is true. That is true. But in fact, one of the first, I think, philosophical principles underpinning whakapapa that comes from Papa Tuanuku and Rangi Nui is responsibility, that we are responsible. We are born into responsibility. Koira te tikanga ake o te whakapapa. That we are born into responsibility and obligation, that we must show and evidence our responsibilities and obligations before we access our rights. Very simple and fundamental principle on the marae, eh? How many of us have understood when we go to the marae and we may mistakenly believe that we can go straight to the pai tapu when in fact we need to go into the kitchen and pick up a tea towel. That is the ability to fulfill your obligation and your responsibility before you access your rights and your privileges. Tapu in this house, te whare o te iho matua, tapu is about being sanctified. I think tapu is about being highly conscious that there's something divine, always something much greater than yourself. An example of those things is walking into a forest, walking alongside the beach, when you suddenly sense that these things are enormous, their enormity is far greater than oneself. And then you get a sense that there is something divine in your presence. That is tapu. The opposite of that, of course, is that when we make it ordinary and we bring it into the physical world, and it's touched by physicality, and no longer do we sense a divinity. If we go further down in the next slide, so that's an example. All these areas, of course, are also present in the physical whenua or one, in the soil. The soil has a pito, the soil has whenua, the soil has a rauru, and it has waiewe. Waiewe, I guess a loose word for waiewe in English is the amniotic fluid. They are amniotic fluids that run right through the physical profile of all soils. Our next slide, I think I might quickly finish off soon, is an interesting, and these of course are the horizons, what's, you know, physical scientists refer to as horizons, and they name them after great big events or the names of towns, you know, quite a physical undertaking really, you know, how they name the different profiles and sections and stratas of soils. Some of us have come together sometimes and we have tried to look at how we would view that as gardeners, as Māori gardeners and soil investigators. And these are some of the words that we've come up with around understanding organic matter as being pararau, rākau, and onemata, which is probably the richest layer of the soil. Tairopi is a mix of carbonaceous material. Onepu is in fact sand, kirikiri are small stones, and then we get down to Te Tokahiki Wai. Te Tokahiki Wai is probably the rock, the parent rock, the top of the parent rock that is responsible for colloidal rises of water streams from the bottom of aquifers up, and they are pulled up to the top of the organic layer. We call this area Te Toka Nifa, and the Toka Nifa, of course, is part of the parent rock that's been there for millions upon millions of years from the dinosaur days. Koinua hia te rā wāhi ko te Toka Nifa Nifa. On the right-hand side of that profile, also in my valley, some of us have, gone around and dug up a few holes and had a good look at different profiles, the fertility of different layers of soils in our valleys alone. And we were moved to understand where our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents and our grandparents 6-7 generations back, we understood from a number of different investigations and studies that we could in fact identify when our grandparents and great-grandparents placed the different layers of soils in the various gardens, the 40-acre gardens around our home. So we named the various layers. We could identify them by the time that our grandparents' hands had touched the soil and amended the soils. So we named various layers after our tipuna. So the next slide, our next slide is just very quickly coming across to the next slide around one of the things that we've started to practice as wahine Māori in my valley. It was initially met with a mixed reaction, and people have become increasingly more settled about it because, you know, as we learn and become more educated around the role of Mother Nature, Papatua Nukuhine Ahuone, and all the female energies and entities inside the pantheon of our atua Māori, we suddenly realised that women play a salient and pivotal role in raising the well-being and welfare of the whenua. So one of the practices that we undertook in my valley recently, in the recent 3 years, was we established what we call a wahine whakamoimiti, a group of women who revitalise and rejuvenate pure, taku, whakamoimiti, and tua, various rites and different kinds of incantations have been revitalised that belong to women. Mā te wahine e take, mā te wahine e kōkiri. And some of those had various po. This is one of the po. There were 5. One of the po that were constructed in a garden referred to as the Mara Tautane was the revitalisation of an old garden that hadn't been in our valleys for 600 years. We revitalised it in order to understand, to bring back to life the rituals of incantation, the rituals of karakia and whakamoimiti that were the preserve and the precinct of women. I think perhaps my last couple of slides, a few slides right at the end. Mahi whakarau is one of the activities that is exercised every year alongside the opening of the Mara Tautane. The Mara Tautane is referred to as the Mara Te Atua. It's a mara that's preserved. We undertake a dawn ceremony and the rituals of planting the best crop, the best tipu or slips of kumara in that garden. Only kumara is permitted in that garden. The kumara must have been a kumara that's harvested from out of your garden for, it's been in your soil for 3 generations. That's the rule in our valley. It must have been in your soil for 3 generations before it's permitted to be propagated in the Mara Tautane, or the mara that is dedicated to Io Matuakore. It's then closed up and it's not reopened again until the following season. Kapai. Again, just to finish off, finally, people, just to finish off, like all the wonderfully hardworking, conscious and awakened people in the presentations previous to mine, the diversity of kai and plant life and insect life and animal life that's attracted into our gardens. These things are absolutely significant because we can pass the knowledge on. We can pass it on intergenerationally. So our mokopuna, they gain not just a knowledge in their head about it, but they gain a love for it in their soul, in their whatu manawa. And that in itself is a value that sits in their puku, until adulthood, and it drives them to pass it on generationally thereafter. I think the next few slides are really slides about how more structured and decisive we have become in passing the knowledge on in many, many different types of forums, individual, small groups, Wānanga, kura. So we have begun to be more decisive about sending our whānau and anybody who chooses to come into our gardens to send them into kura. One of them recently has been the island of Motiti, who we exchanged tipu and kākano with. Nō reira tātou a koe rano hona kōrero. I think I might just finish off there for now. But I want to acknowledge again all the previous speakers. To me, the kaupapa is absolutely phenomenal. I have again been honoured and privileged to be in your presence to make a small contribution. Huri noi tō tātou whare ipurani nei nā koe nei taku mihi ake ki te ihi, te wehi, oru nei tēnā i tēnā o tātou.